I was reborn on the day the doctor diagnosed me as infertile. Holding the diagnosis report, my mother-in-law pointed at my nose and scolded me. If you can't have children, what did we marry you for? In my past life, I suffered countless cold stares and mistreatment from my in-laws because of my supposed infertility. But Santiago refused to divorce me. I was grateful to him. Later, he went abroad for work and never returned for 20 years. Meanwhile, I stayed behind, taking care of his parents, serving them, and seeing them through their final years. My life was wasted away in endless servitude. When I turned 60, the village was compiling the family genealogy. That was when I discovered my name was never even recorded in his family lineage. Next to my husband's name was another woman's. They had sons and daughters, a thriving family, and I, only at the moment of my death, finally learned the truth. I had never been infertile. Chapter 1. I was reborn on the day I was diagnosed as infertile. My mother-in-law was screaming at me, her voice filled with disgust. If you can't have children, why did our family even marry you? Standing beside her was my husband. At this time, he looked about 30 years old, thick eyebrows, deep eyes, gentle yet handsome. Forget it, Mom, Santiago said, his voice warm and understanding. Roma has worked so hard for this family. Even if she hasn't achieved much, she has at least put in the effort. Don't be too harsh on her. In my past life, I was deceived by this fake diagnosis for a lifetime. I lived every day in self-blame. Even when my in-laws insulted and humiliated me, I still did my best to serve them. Not long after, Santiago announced that he wanted to go abroad. Before leaving, he reminded me to take good care of his parents. I was reluctant, but he said, "Who else would want you except for me? I even gave up having children for you, and now you won't even do the small thing for me? I'm only going abroad for us. We don't have children, so we'll have to live in a nursing home when we're old. If I don't make enough money, how will we have a secure future?" Back then, I foolishly believed he was planning for our future. If it weren't for my soul drifting overseas after my death, how would I have seen his blissful life, surrounded by children and grandchildren? He had long since built a family abroad with another woman. The reason he lied about my infertility was just to tie me down to his parents, so that I could take care of them in his place. My mother-in-law gave me a hard shove. Her face, as sharp and mean as ever, was still just as repulsive. In my past life, she had always known the truth, yet she took the secret to her grave, never uttering a single word. To support her, I worked multiple jobs, sleeping less than 3 hours a night. The exhaustion had already wrecked my body. Even on her deathbed, she thrashed around so much that she left the bed in a complete mess. And as I cleaned up after her, she still cursed me. She said I was worthless because I couldn't bear children, that I didn't deserve her son, that I deserved the miserable life I had. Seeing me remain silent, she shoved me again. "Are you deaf? A woman like you, only my son would tolerate you." Santiago stepped forward to help me. I took a step back, looking at the man I once loved. Then, my gaze shifted to the mother-in-law I had served half my life, yet never once earned her gratitude. Suddenly, I found it all laughable. I lifted the diagnosis report, a cold smirk forming on my lips. "Oh, this hospital doesn't seem very reliable. Why don't we go to a bigger hospital for a proper checkup?" At my words, my mother-in-law's expression immediately flickered with panic. Santiago, however, was much better at acting. Even as I spoke, he remained as composed as ever. "Enough, Roma. I know this is hard for you, but it's the truth. You have to learn to accept it." He had said the exact same thing in my past life. Back then, I had also refused to believe it, insisting on going to a larger hospital. At the time, Santiago had responded with these very words. I had been so overwhelmed with emotion, my eyes turning red, thinking that even after I was diagnosed as infertile, my husband didn't blame me and was even comforting me. I had been touched. Now, I saw it for what it was, just another mask of hypocrisy. Feigning guilt, I lowered my head. Santiago's broad hand gently stroked my hair. "It's all right. If you can't have children, then you can't. I won't leave you." Ha! Listen to that. A man's honeyed lies. I blinked back tears and looked up at him with gratitude written all over my face. "You're so good to me, husband." From the corner of my eye, I caught the look of satisfaction on my mother-in-law's face. "Of course my son is good. You must have accumulated 8 lifetimes of blessings to marry my son. You better repay him properly." "Oh, I definitely will," I said with a fake smile. "Repay him? Like hell I will. No rush. Everything your family owes me, I will collect, one by one." As my mother-in-law continued to list out my faults while singing endless praises of her precious son, I nodded along obediently. Just then, a delicate young nurse walked past us. She exchanged a glance with Santiago. Chapter 2. The name on the nurse's badge, Amanda. I had seen that name before. It was recorded in Santiago's family genealogy in my past life. The woman who bore his children. My body trembled slightly. Memories from my previous life flooded my mind, the pain tightening around my chest until I could barely breathe. So, they had already been together at this point. Santiago suddenly spoke, his voice as gentle as ever. "Roma, don't be sad. I'll ask the doctor to prescribe you some medicine to help. Maybe it will work." I looked up and met his affectionate, sincere gaze. In my past life, he had said the exact same thing. But later, I found out, was he really going to get medicine for me? No, he was just rushing off to see his lover. A stiff smile tugged at the corners of my lips. "All right." A flash of excitement flickered in Santiago's eyes. Without hesitation, he strode in the direction Amanda had just walked. I had been so foolish in my past life. The pharmacy was clearly in the opposite direction. Yet I never suspected a thing. After returning home with my mother-in-law, my father-in-law grumbled about being hungry and urged me to cook. I used grocery shopping as an excuse to leave, but I didn't go to the market. Instead, I turned back toward the hospital. A middle-aged male doctor, slightly balding and around 40 years old, happened to walk past me. I hurried toward him. "Doctor, I think I left my wallet in the hospital. Can you help me find it?" He glanced at his watch and frowned. "Where did you leave it?" I pointed in the direction where Santiago and Amanda had entered. "I think it's over there." The doctor strode toward the examination room and pushed the door open without hesitation. A woman's sharp scream rang out from inside. The doctor's face darkened with shock. "This is insane. Amanda, do you even want to keep your job? How could you do this here?" Just as I expected, I wondered what Santiago's reaction would be, now that they had been caught red-handed. It must be pathetic. Inside, I heard Santiago scrambling to explain, mixed with Amanda's sobs. I let out a cold laugh and turned to leave. Word of Santiago and Amanda's affair spread quickly through the hospital. A neighbor of mine happened to work there, and every time she saw Santiago outside, she would give him a strange look. Of course, when she looked at me, her gaze was filled with pity. One day, I went to her house to borrow some salt. She hesitated, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't bring herself to. I asked directly, "Zoe, do you have something you want to tell me?" She sighed, then finally steeled herself. "Your husband is not a good man. He's sleeping with one of our hospital's nurses. You didn't know?" At her words, my eyes instantly turned red. "That's impossible. My husband isn't like that." She shook her head. "You're too naive. Little sister, men are all the same, they're no good." I had heard about Zoe's past. Her ex-husband had not only cheated but also abused her. She had divorced him just 6 months ago. If there was anyone who despised men like Santiago the most, it was her. So, I pretended to defend Santiago, looking heartbroken, my voice trembling as I spoke about how wonderful he was to me, how he would never betray me. Zoe sighed repeatedly, frustrated on my behalf. I watched her indignant expression and let a barely noticeable smile curl at the corner of my lips. Zoe had great connections. It wouldn't take long before Santiago and Amanda's disgraceful affair became public knowledge. Chapter 3. During dinner, I casually mentioned, "There have been some unpleasant rumors going around the neighborhood lately." Even if I hadn't brought it up, this family surely knew about it already. My mother-in-law shot Santiago a look. Santiago calmly placed a piece of food into my bowl. "Those are just baseless rumors. It's all a misunderstanding." I sneered inwardly. "A misunderstanding?" Let's see if you can stay this calm after what's about to happen. 2 months ago, Santiago secured a government-sponsored opportunity to work abroad. To make a good impression, he often worked overtime until late at night. Yesterday, he used the same excuse, too much work, and spent the night at Amanda's place. What he didn't know was that I had been waiting for this day. I had already arranged for someone to install a hidden camera at Amanda's door. Wasn't he saying the rumors were baseless? Fine, I'd give him some evidence. The footage captured him and Amanda locked in a passionate embrace, kissing as if they couldn't bear to part. The sight made my stomach churn with disgust. I copied the video and anonymously sent it to Santiago's rival, Eric. And Eric did not disappoint. Within 2 days, the video had spread throughout their company. As a result, Santiago's overseas opportunity was revoked. Bang! The sound of dishes shattering echoed from the living room. When I stepped out to check, I found Santiago gripping his phone, his face livid with rage. Why? This position was already given to me. Why the hell are they taking it back? This was the first time I had ever seen Santiago lose his temper like this. For the past 2 days, he hadn't gone to Amanda's place. In fact, I had even overheard him arguing with her. Amanda was crying over the phone. Santiago had always been this selfish. He only ever cared about his own interests. In my past life, he treated Amanda well simply because it didn't interfere with his own success. But now that his overseas placement had been taken away, he wouldn't blame me, he would blame Amanda for ruining his future. Santiago was frantic, completely on edge these past few days, but I acted as if I hadn't noticed a thing. Instead, I discreetly contacted an old classmate from the criminal investigation unit and asked him to look into Santiago. The very next day, as soon as I stepped out of my house, I was stopped by an unexpected visitor. A man raised an eyebrow and smirked. Well, you used me to do your dirty work. Aren't you going to offer me some compensation? Chapter 4. The man before me was tall, dressed in a black trench coat, exuding an air of confidence. Santiago's rival, Eric. I hadn't expected him to show up at my door. Feigning ignorance, I asked, "What are you talking about? I don't understand. Do I need to spell it out for you?" His dark eyes bore into mine. I smiled and looked up at him. "What kind of compensation do you want? Isn't this beneficial for both of us?" He replied, "In 3 days, the media will announce the finalized overseas placements. Your husband still has a chance." I merely smiled and said nothing more. When I returned home, I found Santiago sitting on the couch, his face haggard. The ashtray was overflowing with cigarette butts, wiping away fake tears. I walked over and whispered, "Honey, I've thought it through. Whether these rumors are true or not, I can't just stand by and watch you be ruined." I suggested to Santiago that we get a fake divorce. If he married Amanda, the rumors would collapse on their own. Santiago was still hesitant. To convince him, I promised that I would personally clear his name at the media press conference in 3 days. Only then did he finally relax, pulling me into his arms, murmuring, "Isn't this too unfair to you?" I pretended to sob. "We've been married for so many years, and I couldn't even give you a child. Yet you never resented me and have always treated me so well. A little sacrifice on my part is the least I can do." Santiago was deeply moved by my words. Shortly after, we successfully divorced. He even gave me a generous settlement. At the press conference, as reporters bombarded Santiago with questions, he maintained his composure and slowly explained, "Actually, Roma and I are already divorced. Amanda is my wife. How can a husband and wife's relationship be considered improper conduct?" A skeptical voice rose from the crowd. "How do we know you didn't just force your wife to divorce for the sake of securing the overseas placement?" At that, many of Santiago's critics began to chime in. "Exactly. You never mentioned a divorce before, why now? All of a sudden? Right after the scandal erupted? That's too much of a coincidence. Who knows what kind of dirty tricks you pulled?" I stood on the sidelines, watching coldly as the scene unfolded, perhaps because he believed I would vouch for him. Santiago remained composed and calmly adjusted his glasses. "My ex-wife is here as well. She will explain the truth behind these rumors." Then, he turned to me with a hopeful look. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, I stepped forward toward the reporters. Chapter 5. I spoke calmly. There has indeed been a misunderstanding. I wasn't forced into a divorce, I filed for it willingly, with Eric's help. The background behind me changed into a projection screen. At that moment, a video began playing, Santiago and Amanda inside a hotel room. Deep in conversation, Amanda was draped in a bathrobe, nestled in Santiago's arms. Santiago, when are you going to divorce her? I'm carrying your child. You're not planning to shirk responsibility, are you? Santiago kissed her forehead. Of course. I'll take responsibility. That idiot Roma, I need to keep her tied down. Otherwise, once I go abroad, who's going to take care of my parents? Amanda playfully pushed him. You're so bad. But that works for me. I have no interest in looking after your parents. How could I let you do such things? That woman is only good for that much. At least she's decent enough to be filial. Once we're abroad, we can finally be together every day. Santiago's face turned deathly pale. Gasps of shock filled the room. Everyone's expressions shifted from curiosity to sheer disbelief. Santiago frantically turned to the projection screen, his face red with panic. The next second, he turned to me, livid. Roma, you set me up. I smiled indifferently. You brought this upon yourself. The room erupted in a frenzy of camera flashes, with countless eyes on him. Santiago didn't dare lash out at me. He could only grit his teeth and force an explanation. This is fake. It's been fabricated. That's not how it happened. But his feeble protests were powerless against the overwhelming evidence. The scandal exploded. Santiago became the center of public outrage. And with it, his overseas placement was completely revoked. As I walked out of the press conference, I headed straight to the airport. I hadn't expected to run into a familiar figure. A voice greeted me with a smirk. What a coincidence, running into you here. I looked at the strikingly handsome man before me and raised an eyebrow. Aren't you supposed to leave for abroad next week? Eric casually slipped his hands into his pockets and replied lazily. Just going ahead to scout the place first. I have a terrible sense of direction. He happened to be on the same flight as me. Even our seats were right next to each other. It was hard not to suspect he did it on purpose. As the plane lifted off, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. Scenes from my past life flashed through my mind. This was nice. This time, Roma wouldn't be trapped in a suffocating marriage, wouldn't waste her life away, only to die full of regrets. In my past life, I had also wanted to go abroad. I had even written to Santiago, hoping to join him, but all I got in return were accusations. If you leave, what about my parents? Do you have no filial piety at all? Roma, even if you come here, you won't make it. You're better off staying back home and taking care of my parents. That's more important than anything. I looked at the unfamiliar city before me, and a sudden excitement welled up inside me. I asked a passerby to take a photo for me, standing in front of a magnificent, glowing clock tower. I rarely updated my social media, but as soon as I posted this picture, it received a flood of likes. Curious. I checked the notifications. Among them was a comment from Santiago. Mom is sick, and instead of coming back to take care of her, you're out enjoying yourself abroad? Do you even have a conscience? I was so amused by his audacity that I actually laughed. I immediately replied, first of all, she's your mother. Shouldn't you be the one taking care of her? Secondly, we're divorced. You should be asking Amanda instead. He fired back quickly. Amanda can't handle things like this. Roma, you cost me my overseas placement. And now you're being this heartless? I really misjudged you. The comments were only visible to mutual friends. Since I wasn't connected with his colleagues or friends, he dared to leave these messages. But honestly, his reputation was already in ruins. Maybe he just didn't care anymore. I couldn't be bothered to argue with him. I blocked him without hesitation. Over the next few days, I went to several job interviews. None of them went well. Feeling frustrated, I wandered aimlessly through unfamiliar streets. Suddenly, I felt a weight pressed down on my shoulder. Chapter 6. It was Eric. He patted my shoulder and handed me a cup of coffee. What's wrong? You don't look happy. I shook my head. I guess I'm really not suited for this place. I still haven't received a single job offer. Hearing this, he chuckled. Why don't you join my department? I'll pull some strings for you. After arriving here, Eric had quickly risen through the ranks due to his exceptional skills. He was already a director at the company. As if afraid I'd reject him, he spoke again before I could answer. If you feel bad about owing me a favor, just buy me dinner. I'm easy to please. After joining the company, I learned that the position of Eric's personal secretary had been vacant for a while, and the moment I was hired, I became his secretary. Some colleagues whispered behind my back, speculating about my relationship with Eric, but I didn't let it bother me. Instead, I found myself falling in love with the city more and more. It was free, romantic, and most importantly, I had finally found myself. I thought my days would continue peacefully like this. But one evening, as I left work, I ran into Santiago at the company entrance. At first glance, I barely recognized him. Unshaven, exhausted, the once fitness-obsessed man now had a greasy belly. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. Roma. I had no interest in dealing with him. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm. Just give me a few minutes, please. Hear me out. I stared at him indifferently. Make it quick. I have things to do. He gazed at me, his eyes clouded with fatigue. I've been reflecting on myself. I finally realized my mistakes. Roma. Can we go back to how we used to be? For some reason, his words made me want to laugh. I scoffed. You smashed the cup. Ask it, can it go back to how it was before? His lips trembled. His eyes filled with unwillingness. No. We can fix this. You loved me so much before. I know I was wrong now. Why can't we mend what's broken? I smirked coldly. Because I don't love you anymore. No. His grip on my arm tightened. Pain shot through me, making me wince. My mom is sick. She's sick. How can you just ignore her? You loved me so much before. How can you just stop loving me? His manic expression startled me. I struggled to break free, but he refused to let go. His bloodshot eyes stared at me as he kept repeating himself. I have nothing left now. Tears welled in my eyes from the pain. Let go. You're hurting me. Let her go. A firm, icy voice cut through the chaos. Before I could react, Eric shoved Santiago away and pulled me into his embrace. My cheek pressed against his chest. The steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat echoed in my ears. My face instantly grew hot. Chapter 7. Santiago was shoved to the ground, looking up at Eric in shock. His eyes flared with rage. It's you! He glanced at Eric, then at me, demanding furiously. What exactly is your relationship? Above me, Eric let out a mocking laugh. Our relationship? Can't you tell? Roma! Santiago's glare burned with fury, as if his eyes might start bleeding. You dare betray me? I met his gaze coldly. Wasn't it you who betrayed me first? You got involved with Amanda, schemed against me, and wanted me to serve your parents for the rest of my life. The situation you're in now? You deserve it. Santiago raised his hand, aiming to slap me, but Eric caught it midair. Compared to Santiago, Eric was taller and stronger. The force behind that slap was so intense that when Eric intercepted it, Santiago staggered and fell to the ground. He stared at the two of us in utter disbelief. Under his furious gaze, Eric calmly took my hand and led me to his car. As the car passed in front of Santiago, I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but it looked like he was crying. I had never seen him cry before. Even when his work life fell apart, he would get frustrated, chain smoke, lose his temper, but he never cried. Noticing that I had been silent the whole ride, Eric rested a hand on the steering wheel and glanced sideways at me. We've had our little joyride. Where do you live? I'll take you home. When we arrived outside my apartment building, Eric didn't leave right away. After a long pause, he finally spoke. Well, since I'm already here, aren't you going to invite me up? If you want to come over, just say it. I let out a helpless laugh. Fine. Let's go. I had rented a small one-bedroom apartment near my company. It wasn't big, but it was warm and cozy. Eric seemed to love the way I had decorated the place. He kept asking where I bought the decorations, even inquiring about the exact store where I had ordered my bedsheets. Eventually, I couldn't hold back my laughter anymore. "Do you like me or something?" I teased. His face instantly turned red. He forced an awkward smile. Is it that obvious?" Yes, it was way too obvious. From the moment we accidentally met at the airport, I had already noticed. I just hadn't pointed it out. My phone suddenly buzzed with several notifications. I glanced down. It was a message from my mother-in-law. "I'm in the hospital. The doctor says it doesn't look good." Looking at her message, I felt nothing, not even a ripple of emotion. Not only had she mistreated me in my past life, but I knew she had stayed in the hospital before, and it wasn't anything serious, just a mild case of gastroenteritis. I ignored her. That night, I didn't respond to Eric's confession either. Maybe because I wasn't sure yet. Marriage had felt too heavy in my past life. This time, I didn't want to be trapped again. Eric didn't push me for an answer. Instead, he naturally moved on from the topic, as if nothing had happened. That night, we talked for hours. We discovered that we had many shared interests. Before leaving, he asked if I wanted to go hiking with him this weekend. I said yes. Lately, I had been receiving calls from unknown numbers. I had a feeling it was Santiago, but I didn't answer. It seemed like he hadn't returned to our country yet. And yet, somehow, I felt his presence around me. A strange uneasiness crept into my heart. In the past, Santiago had always seemed emotionally stable, but people like him, when pushed to the edge, could do unpredictable things. When someone has nothing left to lose, they become capable of anything. Because of this lingering anxiety, I had been taking Eric's car home every evening. He must have sensed my unease because he made sure to drop me off inside my apartment complex before leaving. But tonight, something was off. As soon as I reached my door, I noticed the lock had been tampered with. A chill ran down my spine. Instinctively, I turned to leave, but before I could react, a shadow emerged from inside my apartment. A strong hand shot out and clamped around my throat. Chapter 8. My throat tightened. I couldn't make a sound. The apartment had been ransacked. The man cursed under his breath. "Hand over everything valuable, or you won't like what happens next." I swallowed hard, my eyes darting to the sharp knife in his hand. I had no choice but to hand over my watch and bank cards, but he still wasn't satisfied. Well, nice body you've got." His eyes darkened with something vile. A rough cloth was shoved into my mouth, the foul taste of blood trickling down my throat. I shook my head desperately, my eyes burning with unshed tears. He lunged at me, tearing at my clothes, and then, a voice so familiar that for a second, I thought I was hallucinating. "Let her go!" Santiago. His eyes were red with fury as he charged in, tackling the man. The two of them crashed to the floor, fists flying. I snapped out of my shock, scrambling for my phone to call the police. Santiago was pinned down, the attacker pummeling him relentlessly. He was already losing strength, lying on the floor, gasping for air. The man turned on me next, his fist swinging toward my face. Pain exploded across my skull as I collapsed to the ground. Then, a sharp, wet sound. I blinked through my daze. Santiago had picked up the knife and plunged it into the attacker's chest. Blood splattered across the floor. The police arrived shortly after. The attacker was taken away in an ambulance. Santiago was led away in handcuffs. As he passed me, he looked at me one last time, a deep, unreadable gaze. The attacker survived. The knife had only pierced his ribs, sparing any vital organs. Santiago was charged with self-defense and released after only a few days. So, I hadn't been imagining things all this time. He had been watching me. Ever since coming abroad, he had rented an apartment near my workplace. Every day, he had quietly followed me, to protect me. I had also heard the rumors about what had happened between him and Amanda. Amanda's baby wasn't his. To put it bluntly, Santiago thought she had come back to rekindle their love. But in reality, she was just looking for someone to take responsibility. And as for who the real father of her child was, not even Amanda knew. In the middle of a bustling street, Santiago let out a bitter laugh. In the end, the one who really couldn't have children was me. His voice was hollow. And yet, I was stupid enough to believe that baby was mine. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. She lied to me. She made me lose everything. He exhaled shakily. And worst of all, I lost you. As Santiago spoke those words, it was as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. The once self-assured man, who thought he was so clever, who believed he could trick a naive woman into dedicating her life to him while he chased his so-called true love, now, standing before me, had lost everything. And only now, when he was left with nothing, did he suddenly remember the wife he had abandoned? But it was far too late. Seeing his regret, his miserable expression, I laughed. To put it simply, you've always been selfish. My words cut through him mercilessly. In my past life, I had wasted everything on him. When I died, he didn't even shed a single tear. In this life, his so-called remorse wasn't because he truly regretted his actions. He was just looking for comfort. He thought his misery would move me. But what he didn't know was, I've lived 2 lifetimes. Santiago lowered his gaze. After a long silence, he finally looked up at me. Is he good to you? I knew exactly who he was talking about. I nodded. He fell silent. At that moment, a car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing Eric. Are you heading home? I'll drive you. Without hesitation, I got into Eric's car. I didn't spare Santiago a single glance. Over the past few weeks, my feelings for Eric had grown deeper. For the first time in a long time, I was beginning to consider something new. Maybe I could give this a chance. That weekend, I went hiking with Eric, and along the way, we ran into Amanda. Chapter 9. The moment Amanda saw me, her first instinct was to avoid eye contact. Somehow, the once beautiful woman, now barely in her early 30s, looked like she was in her 40s or 50s. She had aged drastically. She followed closely behind a man, walking timidly in his shadow. The man wore a hiking jacket, his face harsh and unkind. He kept urging Amanda impatiently, his tone full of disgust. You're useless, can't even handle a simple hike. What's the point of keeping you alive? No wonder your ex-husband didn't want you. Amanda's eyes reddened. I just had surgery 2 days ago. How could I possibly have the strength to hike? She murmured, her voice trembling, before she could say another word. Slap! A brutal slap sent Amanda staggering. She nearly lost her footing, teetering dangerously near the edge. Her hands gripped the rocky ledge tightly, her right leg shaking uncontrollably. Blood seeped through her pants. The man sneered. I'm letting you come hiking with me, giving you face, and you have the audacity to act ungrateful? If you hadn't been so useless last time, nearly falling and ruining my mood, I would have reached the top already. Pathetic! Hurry up and climb. Amanda's legs trembled violently, but she still forced herself to climb the next step. I pretended not to see any of it. Instead, I turned to Eric and casually admired the view. The scenery here is pretty nice. By the time we reached the summit, night had fallen. Eric had brought a tent. Seeing that there was only one, I smirked at him. What? Planning to take advantage of me? He chuckled, his eyes playful. I've been planning this for a long time. The mountain was filled with other hikers. The stars shimmered above us. For some reason, something inside me stirred. Before I could stop myself, I kissed him. His deep voice whispered against my ear. Do you want to try dating me? I looked at him in surprise. Then he added softly, in your past life, you suffered too much. This time, let me spoil you. Will you let me? My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Past life. Did he know? Suddenly, flashes of memory returned to me. Had I ever met him before? Something felt familiar. Maybe once or twice, on my way to work. There was a time when the power went out, and I went to the property management office. Had I seen him there? He looked at me, his gaze unwavering. You only half guessed the truth, he said with a small smile. I don't just like you. I've loved you for 2 lifetimes. I stared at him, shocked and overjoyed. The life I had once thought was nothing but suffering had actually been watched over by someone, quietly loving me from afar. Chapter 10. Eric's Perspective, Extra Story. I was reborn, and I knew that someone else had been reborn with me. Roma, the woman I had loved for a lifetime. It was ironic. Really, in my past life, I had never even formally met her. The first time I saw her was in elementary school. Back then, I was an outcast. I suffered from social anxiety and was completely isolated. No one wanted to befriend me, except for her. She was the only one willing to play with me. At the time, I had long hair, and she thought I was a girl. We often walked home together after school. She was always so kind, even if it was just an injured bird. She would carefully nurse it back to health. But then, my father got a promotion. He moved our entire family to another city, and I never saw her again. Years later, when I finally saw her again, she was already Santiago's wife. Santiago and I worked in the same department. To be honest, his abilities were mediocre at best, but he had a talent for playing office politics. I never thought much of him, and in my eyes, he was never worthy of Roma. But she loved him, so what could I do? When I applied for the overseas placement, my plan was simple: to leave Jiang City forever, to stop interfering in Roma's life. I never imagined that Santiago would be competing for the same position. He was already married, and yet he was still obsessed with going abroad. Then, he took things a step further. He pulled strings, manipulated our superiors, and stole my placement. At first, I didn't care. It was just a job opportunity. But what infuriated me was when I found out he was cheating on Roma. I could never understand what he saw in that nurse. She was nothing compared to Roma. Santiago was blind, completely blind. He didn't deserve her. He never did. And yet, he had the audacity to brag about her at work. I lost count of the number of times he boasted about how obedient Roma was, how she doted on him, how she catered to his every whim. It made my blood boil. Everyone at the company knew. I hated him, and I had my reasons. The night I received an anonymous email, I immediately knew. It was from Roma, because the video she asked her friend to investigate was originally from me. In our past life, Roma wasted her entire life because of Santiago. There were so many times I wanted to go to her, to confess my feelings, but I was afraid that she would never accept me. So instead, I bought a house next to hers, just so I could catch glimpses of her every day. That was enough for me. What she never knew was that, while she spent a lifetime waiting for Santiago, I spent that same lifetime waiting for her. But thankfully, I got another chance. And this time, I won't let go of her hand. I won't let her suffer. Not even for a second.